I have joined me now to discuss the recent development on the Israel Gaza war and plans for ceasefire. Global Affairs Analyst Ejike Okpa. Mr. Okpa, thank you for joining us on The World Now. The Israeli Prime Minister already said a date has been set for a ground offensive in southern Gaza of Rafah. And that's also something that many people are talking about. Do you think Israel is risking an outcast status with the level of international condemnation following its onslaught in Gaza?
Thank you for having me. I think your statement is right. There's been an outcry against this senseless and the incessant destruction of life and properties, especially civilians, against Israel. And Netanyahu is, proven to be who he is, a warmonger, and very stubborn. But I think he's beginning to get the lesson that America, obviously one of the biggest supporters, is, telling him, slow down, let's have this talk. He has a date. He said he has a date, but he hasn't announced the date. So that date could be a year away, it could be anything from now until he specifically says, hey, this is the date we're going to do that. And I guess that's part of, his military strategy. But he's just saying that to get the world attention, maybe to put more pressure on for the talks, for a ceasefire. So we'll see what happens. But, the brand Israel under Netanyahu is getting tarnished. And I don't think from now on people are beginning to look at Israel as, maybe the aggressor. Granted that, October 7th last year triggered what we are now seeing. But before this time, remember, in a fight when people are pushed to the wall, what do you want them to do? Israel has an overwhelming power, against Palestinians. And so the Palestinians, through their own various factions, Hezbollah or Hamas is, they're just going to try to inflict as much damage as they could. And they have done that, given what happened October 7th. And that goes to tell you or challenge us, with all the military intelligence and resources available to Israel, how come they didn't see this happening? And then, and Hamas is still holding 100 and something hostages, and they still haven't been able to identify where they are. So it tells you, you may have the military might, but the human spirit and resilience, especially when they feel they are abused, is always going to resist all the weapons.
Indeed. Mr. Okpa, I want us to take a look at the global response to this. You remember the position of the judges at The Hague. They did say that they ordered Israel to take every possible measure to avoid genocidal acts. According to Palestinian authorities, the casualties have now mounted up to 33,000, including thousands of women and children. Do you think that the world agrees what number of death equates genocide? Because this happened 30 years ago when Hutus and Tutsis were fighting, and the U.S. and the UN couldn't agree that genocide was happening until about 800,000 people died.
Well, again, there's no definite definition. Just like when you look at the Jews, talk about Holocaust, and that Holocaust has been branded and identified with that. Nobody else uses it, and then genocide. It's become a loose word, and everybody can throw around. Just one person dying out of act of wickedness or show of unnecessary power needs to be condemned. We don't have to have a number. We don't have to say, okay, it has to be this number of people. I mean, these are human beings, especially when it's children and women and the most vulnerable are affected. We don't have to have a definition. I'm just hoping that in the 21st century, with where we are in terms of understanding each other, in terms of the history of how we got to where we are, we should be able to start being very accommodating and tolerating of each other. Love thy neighbor. Isn't that something in the golden rule? How come these two people haven't found a reason to be, living peacefully? Instead, there is always a fight. And then the world is drawn into it. And then, of course, there's always going to be a side. Just like the case of, husband and wife. We can start to to fracture your your family. What do you think is going to happen? It's going to be your neighbors and your friends and family members going to take side. So Israel and Palestinians should come to terms with themselves, because we can't continue to see these things, bloodshed and the destruction. It's just very horrible when you look at the pictures, and these are human beings.
So Turkey has restricted the export of some 54 of its products to Israel after Israel rejected a Turkish request for its military planes to join in an aid operation to Gaza. Prior to that, U.S. already threatening to withdraw support if Israel doesn't take decisive steps in ensuring a limited casualty when it comes to civilians. But how much of damage to international diplomacy do you foresee in the coming months?
Well, again, there are people that benefit when the war is on. And there are people that are selling the arms, either doing it officially or smuggling it through some other means. There are people like that, just human nature. They're going to exploit bad situation in order to line their own pocket. It's now in the history of Israeli Palestinians, tension of living, as aggressors on each other. This is the first time, the world is waking up and having the ball, like we say in Texas, having the ball to tell Israel slow it down. And then Palestinian Americans are now getting more emboldened. Before it was the Jewish Americans, because of, their resources and access to power, they are able to use the media to slant the stories in their favor. But now in the world, through social media, we are able to have alternative news. And we're beginning to see that this is horrible. And so we need to call attention to this stuff and see whether we can end it peacefully.
The political and religious divisions are also narrowing to the fact that real people are dying, countless number of people in that case. The implication of, on hate and also on the future peace in the Middle East is also quite critical. But that's our time. Global Affairs Analyst Ejike, live for us in Texas. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for keeping the topic of interest, hot on people's